Welcome to the Stop Suffering in Silence podcast with your host, Denise Walsh and Rachel Timothy.
Hey, you guys. Big welcome back to Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I'm here with Rachel Timothy, co-host and co-founder of Stop SIS. And today we have a super special guest because I feel like a lot of you listening, one of the reasons why you listen is because you feel that stirring in your heart too. Maybe you have heard Rachel's story or you have your own healing experience and you're like, something's got to be done. You know, it's that mama bear in you or papa bear, right? That says this is not okay. Well, our next guest had that same experience 20 years ago. And absolutely did something about it. She founded a nonprofit that she's going to tell us about today that reaches out into the community to women who are involved in commercial sex exploitation and trafficking and supports them on not only getting out, but how to support and take care of themselves in the future. So big STOPSIS welcome to Emily Mills.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, your nonprofit is called Lovely Village, and it's almost 20 years old. So why don't we start by sharing, I'd love to hear a little bit about who you were before you founded this mission, and how did it come to be?
Yeah, who I was before. We started as a grassroots outreach organization. A little bit about myself. I'm from a smallish town, kind of the size of Waco in East Texas. I'm from Tyler, Texas. I grew up in a Southern Baptist world and community. I went to a very large church there. Came to faith. Faith is very much a part of my journey. And so I like to say that I was like selling things and telling people about Jesus all the time. And it's kind of weird because I didn't think those two things really could coexist. But when I look at my life now, it's really fun because we use commerce as a means of really economic empowerment, of dignified work now. But back then as a little girl, you know, I came to faith pretty early. I was raised in a Christian home. But I didn't realize what was happening to me was considered grooming and childhood sexual abuse. That is part of my story that I later came to awareness of when I went off to college to Baylor University in Waco, Texas in 1996. And when I went off to college, I was very depressed. I was pretty low functioning. I was a high achiever, a high leader, president of the class, like very, very driven. And when I got away from home, I just sunk. I was out of my norm. And it's, to some degree, it's pretty normal for college students to go through that funk when you get away. But I think for survivors of trauma, it's compounding. And I know now that I was suffering from depression, from anxiety, from PTSD, and also now I know neurodivergence, but back then I didn't have any language for that. And so as I started to kind of wrestle with my story, I began to meet people in college who were really involved in this worship ministry. And part of my life growing up was with singing. I've always been singing. I've always loved to write music. And so I go to this like Bible study, this large group Bible study, and I see all these college kids like really, really engaged. And like I grew up in a hymns church. So this was like very just in the 90s. It was just kind of this like movement that was happening. And I was like, why are these people raising their hands? Like, what is happening? And so long story short, I end up coming onto the worship team. And my husband now, that I didn't know then, but my future husband was the main worship leader. And we fell in love. We began to travel around leading worship all over the country. But I was also involved as a college student. Waco has 2 times the national poverty rate, which a lot of people don't understand. So we have a big problem and have historically had a really big problem with homelessness and poverty. And so I began to, as part of just my volunteerism, I would go serve the homeless breakfast on Friday mornings. And I would see women come in on that Friday morning who had been working the streets all night long, who were coming in on Friday morning to get breakfast. And some of them were bringing kids in tow with them to get a free breakfast. And then I'd jump in like the van and go sing at a fancy church with green rooms and everything that they needed provided for, and people dressed really nicely. And we didn't make a lick of difference in her life. We had no context for who this woman was as the church. It was largely a move, and it really began to, there was a big space there between what I was seeing on Friday morning and what I was seeing that night on stages across America in the church, in the name of Jesus. And so I had a problem with that. I didn't know how to reconcile it. And so I just began praying for opportunities to put feet to the songs that we were singing. And in 2004, we had just had our first daughter. And in 2004, we ended up leading worship in Austin, Texas. And there were women who took the stage. I thought this was just a women's event, but they took the stage. They started sharing stories about how their lives had been changed by simple acts of kindness from people in the church who went to strip clubs, who went to the streets, who gave them gifts with no strings attached, no 5 points of salvation, no here's how you get out, wham, bam, let's deal Jesus kind of thing. Sheer, unrequited, non-transactional love. And every single one of those women had a history of childhood sexual abuse. And that was also part of my story. And I began to get really curious about how come we have these same common denominators, and she ended up here and I ended up here. How did that happen? And who is she? And I just had a curiosity to know her and also to extend love. I just wanted to love her. And what I didn't know then that I know now. So the Emily before I started going into the strip clubs had a lot of things figured out, I thought. And after my kind of breaking time in college, I began in a real boxed in kind of theological framework of how my faith worked. And when I went into the strip club, all of that changed because I recognized Jesus didn't care about half the things that I was supposed to be caring about. And neither did the women that he loves so much. And so I also learned that, and am learning, I'm still learning that I need to make more space for love. I was out of space. I think the journey for me has been letting my heart be audaciously curious about the people that God created and making more room and more room and more room. And now we've done that not just through outreaches and relationships, but we've done that through programming. We've done that through living wage jobs, through our justice enterprise. We've done that through our Stop Demand School that my husband teaches to offenders who get arrested for buying sex, but he also teaches athletic teams and human sexuality at Baylor University. And he'll go to speak to businesses or churches who want to know, how do we end demand and restore lives? How do we stop this demand? Because we don't have the supply if we don't have the demand, right? So, so we give women living wage jobs. We give them care. We give them long-term support. And as of last January, we were gifted apartment complexes for women and their children. And so that is part of the name change. We have been a village of programs, and we're bringing it all up under one name, Lovely Village now. So we're in the midst of all that goes with raising a lot of money and hiring the right people right now. So it's a fun and crazy time.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Would you say that part of the opening of your heart was letting go of, and this is just kind of my interpretation, so you can let me know if it's on track or not, of like religiosity, black and white thinking, good and bad, judgmental stuff that can come with rules, versus relationship and loving the heart and seeing people the way that God sees them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have learned, there's a guy who I really learn a lot from. His name is Adam Young. He's a therapist. He has a podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves. And I got to know the work of the Allender Center when I started discovering my sexual trauma. And a mentor of mine gave me the book, Healing the Wounded Heart, which Dan Allender started the Allender Center. And it's he's had a lot of great practitioners come out of there. And one of them is Adam Young. And Adam says that there is a correlation between trauma, fragmentation, and certainty. And the brain, when it is traumatized, obviously starts to fragment. And what it really wants is an answer. It wants certainty. It wants black and white. It wants right and wrong. It wants good and bad, because our brains are working so hard to just find rest. And there's nothing more soothing as a trauma survivor to walk into a religious system that has all the answers. When there is a religious system and a theology that says, well, this is why bad things happen to good people, and this is why God did this to you, or allowed this to you, or this is, it becomes like, oh, like, okay, maybe I'll figure out like how to have some peace. And when it, you just want rest. You just want peace. You're just hurting. And so it's actually really a lot harder to hold mystery and hold nuance and be like, man, I walked into this club thinking I was bringing Jesus here. And what I realized is like, Christ is already there and has been there ages, like long before I ever was. And I get to just join in. Like I'm a part, I think one of the detriments of the evangelical movement is like this pressure it puts on individuals to like be the all and the answer for people. And like, we don't know it because our intentions might be good. So I do have a lot of empathy. I was the one who genuinely was like, I can go fix this. I can answer. And I'm like, who am I kidding? Like, oh, bless my heart. I needed so much help. And so I met women who prayed every single night before they hit the stage. And that alone, I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't think, like, what do you mean? Oh, I know Jesus. Like Jesus and I have conversations. I'm like, what? And you're here and you don't go to church every Sunday and you don't have quiet times and listen to Christian radio? Like, I didn't understand that type of woman. I didn't understand that nuance. I didn't understand Jesus. I mean, like I thought I probably did. So
right.
It's changed me.
Absolutely. Wow. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And I agree that, as humans, we want certainty. And so if we're coming from chaos, it can be really attractive to go into that black and white type of thinking when hopefully right throughout the healing process, we realize the world is a bit more gray. But you started, I can't imagine you started with long-term and job opportunities and things like that. So how did you get started? Did you just show up at strip bars?
Clubs.
What are they called? Clubs?
Yeah. Clubs.
Tell us how you got started and how it evolved.
Yeah. So it really evolved because my husband and I really didn't think this obviously would be our life. We thought we would be singing music and writing music for a long time. And so, but as we went, it was like we just kept hearing more and more stories. We just kept trying to piece together. We started looking at broken systems. We started thinking about, well, what can we do with the resources that we have and the connections that we have? Like, how can we leverage everything that is within our means? How do we leverage that on behalf of this woman who is largely disenfranchised and marginalized? So we just kept telling the stories. As we would hear from women, we would share their stories in a way that didn't attach like their name or identity to them. But as we had opportunities to go speak and go to these places of faith who were asking us to come, we just kept sharing the reality of like what was happening and the things that people weren't seeing in their own backyard. We started growing and expanding all across Texas with these outreach teams, and that was great. But basically,
can you describe what an outreach team does?
Yeah, an outreach team goes into the clubs and gives simple gift bags of kindness and love to women in the industry. And they might be there for 10 minutes. They might be there for an hour. But the goal is just connection and relationship. And that's it. And so we have high quality gifts. So things like they're themed like each month. So it could be like flowers on Mother's Day or food. We do homemade pies at Thanksgiving. Depending on what the club lets us bring in, because we also are very respectful of management and we make it a goal. We don't interact with patrons. We're not trying to dissuade, that night anyone or pull any girl, out of there. So yeah, they're just really simple gift bags. And as we began to grow, we began to see that this same woman in Waco, Texas, this was consistent across the state in terms of the demographics may have changed, but what she was walking into the industry with, the damage that was incurred while she was there, and the trauma coming out, all of that was the same. I mean, we were dealing with one woman. Most of the women that we reached had children. Many had criminal records. Many were struggling with mental health issues, undiagnosed, untreated. Many had a criminal history. I may have already said that. Lack of transportation. It was almost like, they didn't choose the industry. The industry chose them.
Yeah.
And 89% we know want out, but have no other means of survival.
Wow.
So I'm not focused on the 11% that might say, oh, I really want to be here. You've got 89% of women in porn, in strip clubs, in massage parlor, where 89% in the sex industry, that's the ones we know of that say they want out. Like, who's giving them a way out? And we didn't have, as an outreach organization, we didn't have a way out. And that was really problematic for me. I like solutions, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes it gets me in trouble. But I don't like not having options. We just needed more options. We needed more opportunities. We needed businesses to like step up and hire women who wanted out. We needed to lower the entry level for, criminal records or educational barriers, credit checks, all the things that it was just too hard. Childcare. I mean,
Yes.
it was just tough. So we began to kind of fill in those gaps. And in 2014, we were gifted our building in Waco, Texas, and we gathered about 30 women in our building. And we said, what do you want this space to be? And they were the ones who unequivocally said something related to commerce and jobs. They said, we want a way to get jobs, which meant training. We want a way to keep jobs, which meant supportive community. And we want a way to, some of them start our own businesses. And so that was entrepreneurship. And so that's how we came up with Lovely. It was called Lovely Enterprises at the time, but it's part of Lovely Village now, where we make bath, body products, candles. We sell T-shirts, anything we can do to create living wages for women. And then we use that building space to also incubate businesses and give women microloans to start their own companies.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I would love to have you also explain some of the collaboration that you've done in your county and how you have, you explained it to me on the Zoom not too long ago with all of the different ways that you guys combat trafficking in your county. I want to duplicate that where I am. So could you explain that again for our viewers?
Yeah. So, it's really been a beautiful, but also hard, as problems are. You want to bring so many people to the table. And I think for me, I was so overwhelmed with the work. I kind of had my head down and just focused on our population. And I knew that trafficking was a problem, but I didn't understand how nuanced and how, truly, it was just online. Now you had this thing called the internet. So now it was like, how in the world are we going to do this? And we knew, like, we're having these problems, but we felt helpless and like we can't do anything about trafficking. We're not law enforcement. We don't have enough resources to just start going and training. And there was another organization that launched, I think it was around, I want to say it was around the time that we were opening our building. It may have been like 2012 or something. And their mission was to end trafficking. And so labor trafficking, sex trafficking. And so there was definite overlap there between our organization, and Waco's small. So like, it's not like Houston or Dallas or Austin. So when you have several nonprofits whose populations overlap, that can be a little tricky in terms of like partnership and, well, what are you doing? And how are we differentiating on who we're serving and how we're serving? So we just began to have conversations, and they were the ones who said, we need a coalition. We need a coalition to where we're going to bring all the stakeholders together. And so they developed the Heart of Texas Human Trafficking Coalition. And so we've got every nonprofit that would even touch the issue of trafficking. So like our Family Abuse Center is there, our youth services, child protective services, DA's office, sheriff's department, police department, faith-based outreaches, churches, foster care agencies, homeless, shelters, just so all of us who may interface with potential victims of trafficking know what we're looking for. And so they do monthly trainings where we all go, all the stakeholders are there. They've really done just a great job in getting quality leadership there to kind of push the issue forward. And McLennan County really became aware pretty soon that this was a bigger issue than we thought that it was. Mm-hmm. And so we now, their goal, and they would say, we wanted to make Waco a hostile place for traffickers. And that's exactly what it's become. Our sheriff's department now, you're going to be talking with Detective Scaramucci, who was with us, but they began to deputize agents so that they could go across state lines and really track where traffickers were coming from outside of McLennan County, because we could have, down 35, someone coming all the way from Duluth, Minnesota, all the way down to, the border.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So it's been a great, it's been really cool to watch.
Well, I've already talked to my commissioner, so he's like, tell me how they do it, and we'll go after it. So,
well, y'all need to come down.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel like having all of these organizations collaborating with each other helps to make a louder voice, or actually makes them maybe a louder impact?
Yeah. I've had to learn, I think, as again, these are like survivor wounds. So when you're a survivor and you're scrapping for everything that you need on your own because like the world is against you and you never have enough, that scarcity mentality is very real, because it was real. Because no one really was maybe looking out for you, and you had to do it. You had to make a way for yourself. And but the way that you heal is through people, right? And so once you began to experience community, like healthy community, not given like I'll do this and you do that, even though there is some of that, but once you really experience like I am supported, I am loved no matter what I do, no matter how I perform, I have what I need. And if I don't have it right now, it's going to come. We'll get there. I think once you experience that kind of community, it becomes easier to collaborate. But it can feel very threatening at first when it's like, I want to make sure the women that we're serving get what they need. And so I can become clamped down and like protective, because I'm like, no, they're going to get what they deserve. And, I think I've just had to learn like collaboration does take hard work. And it's very mature work. Like it grows you up. You can't be like a toddler running around like demanding your way all the time. So it's taken a lot, I think, for us to learn how to do that well, and know and trust like the community is for us, and the community is for our women. And I don't have to be the loudest voice at the table.
I know. Well, I was going to say, I know some organizations that are all within the same town that will then fight over donors. And that can end up being a huge struggle.
It is. Yeah. And you feel like you're all fighting kind of for the same dollar. And Waco has done a really good job. We have a few, not just the coalition, we have several coalitions. There's the homeless coalition, the youth coalition, the trafficking coalition. But we have this thing called Nonprofit Network. And then we have a couple of other nonprofit groups that we go to network and just get to know each other, because some of our employees like jump from, once you're in this space, it's kind of like recruiting, like, hey, I don't have a space for you here anymore, but hop on over to that nonprofit and maybe work for them, or vice versa. And it does feel like in some ways we're all after similar dollars, but we can make each other stronger. And I think we're learning how to do that, because that is a healthy part of competition. Yeah, I'm a sports person. And so, how are y'all sports people?
Yeah. Which sport?
Okay. So, I played volleyball. My daughter was a college volleyball player. My son is a basketball player. And my grandfather was a college women's basketball coach.
Oh, where at?
East Texas.
Okay.
Like a little East Texas college. And so anyway, we have like just lots of sports people. My dad played football for UT, walked on the football team there. So he was a football guy. But in sports, how when you play a team that's like not as good as you play down.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you go to play and it's so frustrating. You're like, why am I acting like I've never played this before? It's so frustrating. You start playing worse, but you get a good team on the court and you've got to like show up. You got to like know your stuff. You got to be sharp, and people usually perform better when it's a well-matched, speaking of the Super Bowl, It wasn't a blowout. It was a really well-matched game. And it was fun,
Yep.
because both teams are kind of playing into their potential. And so I think in the same way with nonprofits, it's like when somebody starts kind of leveling up, and kind of getting their stuff together, you're like, oh, well, we better learn a little more of what we're supposed to be doing here. And it's good for us. It's growth, it just requires more.
Well, and I think a few things. Number one, not one organization can do all the things. So, we've primarily focused on educating and working with those on the healing journey. So we don't have a location or a place for people to go if they're working to get out of the life, things like that. So collaborating with people who do have the pieces of the puzzle that we might not is super valuable to everybody, because then you have resources and you aren't just I think if you're a one-stop shop, then oftentimes it's like spread too thin, you know what I mean? So if each organization is doing their job well, then hopefully a lot of the needs can be met. But my next question is, do you feel like it's helped with slowing down trafficking in your area?
Well, for sure. I remember hearing at a training a survivor saying that she said, the reason why no one is stopping trafficking in my community is because no one's looking for me. And she said they didn't think they had a problem with trafficking because they didn't know about trafficking, and they didn't even know to look for me. Once they started looking, they start seeing, oh my gosh, we have a problem. And now I think we're doing a better job at identifying, restoring, prosecuting, like working with our DA to make sure we understand, like, hey, this is a trafficking situation. So we need to throw the book. We need to get everything we can on this perpetrator. And really stacking up some of those charges so they don't get out and do it again. So that's really been the goal, because it does, like to your point, it does take so much collaboration to know that your DA cares about this issue, to get before them, because you can do all the arrests and all the stings all day long. But if you have a weak DA who's not going to prosecute, they're going to be out of there doing it again. So yeah, I think from every level, Waco and McLennan County, Central Texas is aware. And I will say that when I tell people what I do or who we are, they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I've heard about this issue. And that was just not the case. Like 2004, 2007, like nobody even knew. I didn't even know. And I was going into the very places where it was happening.
Yeah.
My
next question, I'm kind of curious, what have been some of your husband's experiences with working with perpetrators?
Yeah. So I would say that's been newer. We started the Stop Demand School in I think our first class was in 2015, 2016. And when we started, you have to have that relationship with the DA that's even going to send people to that. Because if they don't want to, and they don't believe that it's an important curriculum, then they're not going to send them. So I think we've served over 250 now. John's through that school. That's not including how many he's trained, but just legally through our legal system. And I think one of the first stories that I remember him telling was about a man who tried to buy a 16-year-old online, and he was interfacing with a detective. And so, he gets picked up in the sting. He has to go to Stop Demand School, and he's, like this the whole time. And they're all like, oh, it was entrapment. They always try to say that. Oh, it was entrapment. was like, dude, you tried to buy a 16-year-old. Like, you can't do that. And so Brett kind of is teaching the class. And one of the first parts of the class is tell me your story. What led you to buying sex? What led you to click? And they don't move on from the curriculum until everyone answers their why. Tell me your why. Why are you here? Oh, because I got entrapped. Well, you can't say that. What made you want to buy sex? Why did you want to do this? And so this guy starts sharing, and Brett just said in the back of his mind, he kept hearing this voice that said, ask him when the last time he was happy was. And Brett's like, I ain't asking this guy. This guy tried to buy a 16-year-old. I ain't asking him when the last time he was happy. And I mean, Brett just kept hearing, ask him. And so he says, finally, the guy has shared his story. He says, my wife, we live in separate rooms. She takes care of her invalid parents. We've been married for 40 years. We are passing ships in the night. I never get attention, affection from her. I just wanted connection. Brett's like, oh my gosh, it's the worst excuse I've ever heard. Ask him when he was happy. So he asked him, and he says, when were you happy? And he said, when I was 16. And he said, well, what made you happy when you were 16? He said, that's when I met my wife. And that's the age of the girl that he tried to buy. And Brett said it was in that moment that I recognized even sex buyers have a story. And if they can't connect their own compulsions, their sexual behaviors with their why, then they won't recover. They won't understand it. Now, obviously, Brett's not a counselor. The guy needs a lot of help. But I think it gave us a place of understanding that the goal is not, jail doesn't heal anybody. Imprisonment does not heal people. I understand it's what is needed in order to keep victims safe. But if we really want to stop this, we need to understand motives behind sexual dysfunction. And we have survivors here at Stop Demand School. We had one survivor who has survived some of the most heinous abuse. And she got up there and she told the Johns, this is a room full of offenders. And she said, if I can change, then there's hope for you too. And I just was like, this is just a level of, like, I don't get that kind of generosity. And I need to understand her wisdom in extent, because this is a room full of people who have harmed other women just like her. And she is willing to generously extend the hope for change for them, It's just miraculous. It's just, yeah.
It's Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you have a story of a girl that maybe you met in the strip club that eventually came to work for you guys and now is out on her own?
Yeah. I'll tell one of the most recent, just because I'm super proud of this individual right now. So, gosh, there's so many, but I think of Stephanie. So Stephanie, our team met. I didn't even meet her originally because this is when we had outreaches all across Texas. And this was our team in College Station. And so our team member met Stephanie. She was a mom. She was a new mom. She had dropped out of Texas A&M because she was helping her boyfriend pay bills, and he wrangled her into working at the club. And she had one semester left.
Oh.
And she starts working at the club. And it changes her life. Of course, she has multiple children with this man. He ends up becoming really, really addicted to drugs, becoming very dangerous and violent. She leaves him. He ends up in prison. And she comes to Waco. And I met her. We were like speaking at a church that I didn't even go to, but she happened to be visiting that church. And I was like, Stephanie, I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing in Waco? And she was like, oh, I'm relocating here. And I said, well, we're starting our job training class pretty soon, and we would love for you to apply to come. And so she goes through our program. She goes through our job training program, and she tells a story about how it was like waking up. She said it really was like waking up. Like I hadn't had a chance to really think even about what I wanted my life to be. I just was taking care of children and taking care of this man. So she really starts waking up to her own life. She graduates the program, and we hire her to come work for us as a case manager at the time. And she says, what I really want to do is finish college. Well, then it was 2020, and thankfully all the classes go online. And so we help her reapply to Texas A&M. We just pull all the strings that we had that we knew to pull. She begins writing her story out, like, please, I only have one semester left. Like, can we reduce barriers? All this kind of stuff. She finishes her bachelor's degree in business marketing. She comes on staff with us. She then determines, you know what, business marketing is cool, but what I really am is a coach. And I want to be a life coach. And so we began connecting her with resources and opportunities. She outgrew us. She was like, okay, now I have 5 kids and I need to make a lot more money. And so she landed a job at one of our community colleges, making an incredible salary. She is a success coach there. She's doing remarkable. And she still gives us like 10 hours of her week because she can't get enough. And maybe when we can pay her enough, she'll come back. But Stephanie's truly just a force of goodness and relational. She has such high relational capacity that is just one of those beautiful gifts that God just wove into her. Even it was never lost. It was never lost. Even a decade in the sex industry, it was never lost. It's so cool to watch her skills come to be, full circle.
Aw, praise God.
Yeah.
I love what happens when you are put or you choose, right, a new community of people who believe in you, who see the best in you and are encouraging you. So much change can happen when you're in a healthy community. And It sounds like just being a part of what you guys had to offer gave her a ladder to climb, a place to give back, a purpose for her pain, and then vision for a future that she didn't even know she had.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The growth is probably just one of the biggest joys, just to watch like colors change and come alive. And it's slow work. It's not like it's overnight, it takes a while.
We totally get what you're saying. Completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rachel, do you have any other final thoughts or questions?
Oh, I just appreciate your work with women and letting God lead you. I was touched by many of the stories you shared, and you're making a beautiful impact for the Lord, and I'm so, so grateful.
Well, it's an honor. So I'm so happy I met you.
Yeah, right back at you.
Well, if you are in Texas, or it sounds like, is Texas mainly the main hub of your mission, or is it anywhere?
We are in Waco, Texas, but we serve women from anywhere, especially who need to relocate, which happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, right. So, and it's lovely. Is it lovelyvillage.com or org? I want to.
Lovelyvillage.org. And we do have the most amazing candles and fragrance sprays. And so please, please, please support us, because everything you buy goes straight to our programs, and everything that we make is survivor made, survivor paid. The more we sell, the more we can employ women. So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for sharing your story, for saying yes to that still small voice that stirred within you so many years ago. And it's just amazing to see as you continue to take steps forward with your organization and the collaborations within your community, the impact that everybody together can make. So you guys check out lovelyvillage.org. The link will be in the show notes below. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this message with anybody that you know is interested in this topic and or wants to support and do something. I think we often wonder, what can we do? Well, supporting ministries like this can give you that action step. So thanks again, Emily, and to everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.